Hit the record button here. Hi, everybody. We're just going to give it another minute or so here as we have more people that are coming in through. Excellent, excellent. I'm Derek Maines for anybody that hasn't yet met me, and I think that's probably a lot of you. So, all right, well, they are pouring in. I think the whole state of North Carolina is here. All right, we're going to give it just 1 minute and then we will go ahead and get started. For those of you who have not met me yet, my name is Derek Maines and I'm the CEO of Process Triage. And today we are going to be talking about the process triage methodology. We're also going to show you how to do a technique called a Quickmap. And a Quickmap is a way for you to use this mechanism, this methodology, and do an abbreviated version of a triage. So, okay. I'm going to make one more co-host here. Let me find Pamela in my list. For those of you just joining us, I've got a couple people from my team in here, including Pam Mativier, who is our CMO. I have Tracy Ann, who is our VP of Operations, and I have Eric Dorr, who oversees our business development. All right, looks like we've got a great group in here, 30 plus people. So I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Hey,
and
Derek,
yes,
just a little logistics because I'm ops, so I have to do that.
Yes.
I will put everyone on mute just for
Okay,
random
please.
outside noises. If you have a question, you can raise your hand in the bottom reaction corner. Or if you want to put something in chat, I will be monitoring the chat.
Sounds great. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us here today. For those of you just...
Oops. How do I unmute Derek? Shit. I'm trying.
how about that? Is that better?
Yes, there you
All
go.
right. Woo, logistics issues.
I didn't know it was that easy to mute you.
Well, listen, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Derek Maines. I'm the CEO of Process Triage, and I want to welcome you today to this webinar. We're going to spend the next 60 minutes talking about why systems are really important inside your organization. And we are going to provide you with a methodology that will show you how to map out some processes inside your organization, and then talk to you about the opportunity to become certified in the process triage methodology, if that's something that you're interested in, or if your company would like one of our facilitators to come in and help you, we can provide that service as well. So I'm going to get started. Let me tell you a little bit about, let me get my, oh, we're still getting more entering here. Hold on, here we go. All right, there's my video. All right, come on now. The first thing I want to do, though, is I want to play a game with you. You each can play this game independently. And that is, I would like you to look at the numbers on the screen, and I would like you to find the numbers 1 through 49 in consecutive order, meaning starting with 1, then 2, then 3, 4, 5, on through. So you're starting with 1 and you're finding up to the numbers 49, and I will give you 10 seconds starting now. 3 seconds left. I can imagine that no one got the whole way to 49. This is a really difficult exercise, trying to find the numbers 1 through 49 in a big jumble. But what if I made it slightly easier? What if I said, let me remove any number that isn't 1 through 49? And let's just do this again in 10 seconds and see if you could do a little bit better. Got 3 seconds left. Okay, so that's slightly easier because we have removed a bunch of the junk. But what if we actually showed you that there was a system? And that's in that system, ones were always at the bottom left, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That would make it much easier because you have a system. Now, is that easier or is this easier? Obviously, this one is significantly easier in finding those numbers. And the question that I ask you is, which one looks more like the systems in your business, this one or this one? And if you're like 98% of the people that I talk to, this is the one. This looks more like our business on a daily basis. And that is a challenge because that means it takes a long amount of time to do things. And when we can streamline processes inside of an organization, when we can elevate communication around systems, magically the work gets easier to do. And when the work gets easier to do, we have more capacity to do that work. We have more joy in doing that work. And we don't have as nearly as much stress in the work. This is a win 360. It's good for the company. It's good for the employee. It's good for the customer. It makes everybody stronger and better together. Edwards Deming, who is the creator, considered to be the father of Lean and Six Sigma, he created the quality revolution here in the US. And in the 1920s and 30s, he was a physicist. In 1941, he was asked to, or actually, I'm sorry, in 1940, he was asked to participate in the US Census. The census had actually gone out in 1940. The numbers came back, and everyone was confused because they didn't make sense. Deming came in and created a systematic statistical structure to determine census. That methodology is used around the world to count people now. After he did that work, he was asked to come into the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and create most of the measurements that you will see on the evening news tonight: GDP, unemployment rates, how things flow in our economy. These were determined statistically by Deming. In 1942, when the war broke out in Europe and in Japan, Deming was asked to create the war standards, and he did that. He went into the systems of the American industrial machine and he figured out a way to optimize them. In his research after the war, he said that 85% of the reasons for failures are deficiencies in the system and process rather than the employee. Later in his life in the 1980s, he was asked by a reporter, did that number hold true? After his work in the US, he went over to Japan and helped them rebuild after the war. And they were asking him, was that number true statistically? And he admitted it was not. From his research, it was 94%. 94% of the problems inside of organizations and deficiencies and failures and reasons we need to do rework is because at the root cause, there's a problem with the system. So if that much of our time is, if that much of our problems are created by the system, the real question is how much time do we spend there? And if you're like most businesses and most individuals, not very much. So let's talk a little bit about what our businesses are comprised of and what makes a system. Every business technically is in exactly the same business. We all transform inputs into outputs. We get materials, we get people, we get labor, we get customer requests. We take those things and through a process of transformation, we turn them into an output that someone wants to buy. That output has a greater value than what they can get on their own, and they want to purchase it from us. If we're smart business people, we also know the outcomes. We know what happens to that product after the customer gets it, and if they get the value from it that we had hoped. That's why we use NPS scores and lots of different ways to measure that. But unfortunately, the throughput, how the sausage is made, is something that very, very few of us understand. But that is that place where the transformation occurs, where the costs are being spent, where the value is being created, yet we don't have much of a handle on it. We've got to change that. Many of you are probably familiar with the work of Simon Sinek. In the book Start With Why, Simon Sinek said that every organization knows what they do. Some know how they do it, and very few know why. We need to start with why. So if starting with why is so important, and we know it is, we've heard this over the years, it's important to connect people to our why. The real question is, what is next? Well, the next is how. How do we do the work and how do we do it more efficiently? There is a process for everything inside your organization. That process has come from one of two ways. You either were the agent of it and you used intelligent design and your abstract thinking to create that process, or that process has come about through evolution and mutation and adaptation. And the problem with that is that means that that process is inconsistent. It doesn't have all of the right things it needs to function at its highest form. It might be sufficient, but it is not efficient. And our goal is to reduce friction in those systems to make things more efficient. So let me tell you a little bit about process triage and the methodology we'll be talking about today. Process triage was originally created in 1993 as a part of one of America's largest telecom companies. The problem that they were having at the time was that their costs were rising in a highly competitive environment, but no one could see the entire system. There were 45 executives, all that had different silos of understanding of the business, and they would get together and they would interact, but no one had a purview on how the entire system worked. Rosie Rosenberger was a former Army Ranger that was an engineer at that organization, and he was asked to lead an effort to find out how that company did business. He went out, he took these large foam core boards, sprayed them with glue, took half sheets of paper, and started the first process triage methodology. This is a picture of that first event back in 1993. And you can probably tell because of both the fashion as well as the beeper that is on Rosie's belt there. So this is where process triage was created. And the most interesting thing about it was they were bringing frontline employees together into a room and asking them to show them how the work gets done. Now, as that conversation in the room occurred, Rosie realized something, and that was the conversation among the people was very different than what he was seeing at the executive and board level. The conversation at the executive level was around brands and balance sheets and budgets and compliance with systems. At the middle level of the organization, middle tier managers talked about how they needed more resources, how they needed better software, how they needed to hire more people. But the frontline employees regularly spoke about things that were happening that should not be happening, broken things. That is the original methodology. This is what it looks like today. This is a workshop that we just performed a few weeks ago. And this is working with a company, bringing their frontline employees together and mapping out the interconnectedness of the process. And then the pink sticky notes you see up there is those pain points that the conversation is leading us to throughout that workshop. Where is there pain in the process that is slowing the process down, that's creating bottlenecks, that's making life difficult for the employees, life difficult for the customers, and profitability, quality, and value difficult to obtain for the organization? So what is process triage? It is about quickly assessing events, process behaviors that happen that should not happen, sort out what their solutions are, and then focus on the ones that are most important to the organization. So documents tell us why. Financials tell us what. But the only method that shows us how and where are maps. Maps are very important. We've been in the process mapping business for over 20 years, and it is absolutely astounding when you present a map to a team and they get to see the business in a way that they have never seen it before. I'm actually going to show you a photographic example from just yesterday of me rolling out a 30-foot process map for a company. So early on in human history, we dealt with a lot of dangers in our environment. And if we as a group, the 40 of us, were out on the tundra and we came across a tiger, we would be terrified and we would run in all directions and we would hide and we would hope we were faster runners than the rest of the people in the group. But the results likely would be somewhat catastrophic. And then one evening, by the light of the fire, someone on the cave wall drew a picture of a tiger. And all of the sudden, we could use our power of abstraction. And we could stand there shoulder to shoulder at the cave wall and look at that tiger. And we could look at individuals and we could say, you know what? Chase is probably the fastest runner in this group. Eric is pretty good with pointy sticks. And Derek is good at picking up large rocks and smashing things. And we could strategize. And we could stand beside each other and we could look at the threat in a non-threatening way. a way that couldn't hurt us. And we could look at it and say, which parts are the jaggy parts? Which parts are the parts that are going to be less dangerous? And we could abstract and create strategy through these mapping of our actions. We then could go out into the world and have an experience with that tiger. And then we could come back and we could iterate on it again and again and again. And if you ever look at cave paintings, look at what most of them are. They are maps. They're telling us when the seasons are going to happen, where there's water, where there's food to be found. They're strategizing on hunting techniques. If you really look at it from the perspective of understanding the people at that time standing at that wall and what they were doing, this wasn't just cave art. These people were making connections with each other, standing at the wall, shoulder to shoulder, bumping into each other, pointing things out, asking questions, and abstracting how they were going to solve the problem. Here's a great example. Yesterday, I presented to a large group of employees inside of a company. We came in and we did a workshop with their teams. We brought them all together. We built the map. The CEO asked me to come in and roll this map out for the employees and to give them 5 minutes to discuss it. After 25 minutes, we had to go over and extract everybody from the wall because, as you can see, they got excited. They got engaged. There's lots of fingers pointing. There's conversations. People are stepping away from the wall, breaking into other conversations. They're having an abstract, strategic conversation about the process inside their company and how to make it better. There's another thing about standing shoulder to shoulder. When you're up there and you can see the pain and hear the pain from the other people inside the organization, and you maybe are the person who's responsible for the process that creates that pain, then very, very quickly you start to get some empathy and you start to realize they were all in this thing together. We aren't a bunch of departments. We aren't numbers on a page. We aren't a document. We're living, breathing organisms that are working together in an interdependent system. And this is the only method in which you can see that. So this is the type of work that we do. Highly detailed, good project process maps that show the interconnectivity between the work, the milestones that occur inside of that work, and how all those things come together. We call this action result mapping. It's a little bit higher level than like detailed work instructions. What we're looking for here is the lines on a map are the work and the circles are completed segments of work. So what you're looking at here is a to-do list for this entire company of every step along the way. That's what the map does. But then we ask employees, what are the pain points that you are experiencing? These can't be resource constrictions. They can't be people. We're talking about the observation of activities that are occurring that should not be occurring. We have them place them up on the board, and then we teach a root cause analysis tool called Triage to determine how to solve that problem. And many times, the problems at the front line of the organization are quite small and easy to resolve, but they're also easy to see how they will eventually snowball and join with other pain points to become the kind of things that keep us awake at night. So, on our website, you can find, and we'll drop it in the chat here, we have a process called Quickmap. And I'm going to walk you through that. It is an exercise that you need to do on your own separately from this, but we will drop in the chat here how to access all of this information. This is the first thing that I like to do. If you sat through one of my Vistage talks, I don't do this exercise in that workshop, but it is something that I highly suggest you think about from your company and your organization. What do you do with this? This is a map of thinking about the 4 core processes in your business and then the additional processes that support that. Now, traditionally, this is going to look something like this. Sales and marketing, operations, production, delivery, fulfillment, and service would be your 4 core processes. And then your secondary processes might be human relations, procurement, finance, R&D, and technology. Every company is different. I did this with a company yesterday. 3 of their processes are accounting. They have accounting, they have billing, and they have finance. They are all 3 independent departments with independent leaders and independent processes. Okay, that's completely fine. They have 3 processes in there. But thinking about this inside your company and recognizing what are the processes that you have. This is an exercise you can download from our website. It prints out on an 8.5, 11 by sheet of paper. It's a great tool to abstract with your team. What drives things to occur here? What are the supporting functions of that? And then how do those things all work together? When I do this exercise, after you've written out what your 8 core are, you might have more than that. Draw other circles on the corner. Oh, we also have a subcontracting process. We have a change order process. You have other things that might be independent of these that might not fit, and maybe it's the secret sauce of your business. But then I like to show this to the senior level executives, and I ask them to extract a finger, pull out their finger, look at that, and point to where it hurts. Which one of these things are the things that are going to hurt you the most, or are hurting you the most right now? That is a great place to start, because what we want to do is resolve pain inside that process. We want to improve the efficiency of that and streamline that so that it opens the opportunity up for us to have more capacity. When we have more capacity, we can do more things. See, it's one thing for me to come into a company and talk to employees that are already overworked and say, we're going to do this process thing. And yeah, it's going to be more work today, but in the future, it'll pay off. And that certainly is the case. But it's better to start one place, free up some resources, and then work from there. So think about, and even just do this in your mind right now or on a sheet of paper that you have in front of you. What are those core processes and which one hurts the most? And I bring that up because over on our website, we've dropped it into the chat, theprocessfixer.com/quick maps. There's a number of different assets. You can download that diagram that I just showed you there. You can also download the map, which is a quick map exercise. It's a little different than the one I'm going to show you on screen. We have a version of that up there as well, but this one prints on 8.5 and 11 by sheets of paper. We use a lot of plotter printers here and print blueprint kind of documents that are 3, 4, 15, 20 feet long. This is just a simplified version that you can print out on a couple 8.5 and 11 by sheets of paper and stack beside each other. There's also the triage guide there. And that triage guide is going to show you and teach you the questions that you need to ask about the pain. And then finally, there's a video there of me doing a tutorial of the basic simple version of this. So I'd like to walk you through that so that you have instructions so that afterwards you can download that document, you can look at the triage guide, and you can watch that video and it'll take you through the process. So this is what the version looks like that we do at Vistage. Again, the one that you'll see is a little simpler. It looks a little bit more like this. It's just simpler for paper purposes. So the first thing that you want to do is think about the process that hurt the most, the one that you said to yourself, boy, that's the one I lay awake at night and think about. Identify that what that is. And then over in that, the far left in the first bubble, write down what starts that process. Now, for the method of action results mapping, we like to think about things from an actions and results. So the lines are actions and the bubbles, the circles, are the results of those actions. So inside those bubbles, you want to put in what the result of that work is. The way that we like to explain this is that inside the bubble should be a noun and a past tense verb, meaning that it's usually 2 or 3 words. Order received, RFP quoted, materials acquired. They're going to usually end in ed. Those are past tense verbs. I know some of you are grammar Nazis on here and you might be thinking, what about sent? Well, sent is a past tense verb and you can use that if you like. To keep myself straight, I just make it sentited. That way I remember that everything ends in ed. So you're going to write down each individual thing, what the noun is and what the past tense verb is, and put those in the succinct order from 1 to 10 of the steps that are going to take you from the process trigger, lead generated, over to the end of the process, that red button, the milestone at the end. What is that? Lead converted or invoice sent. Map this out on your own after this time. Print these out and go through that process, writing out your 10 steps in the process. Now, if you need to branch off someplace, I totally understand that. If you need an extra bubble or you need to cross one out, that's okay. But usually working inside those 10 bubbles, you can come up with a pretty great high-level map. The next thing that we want to do is think about what that map, what that process or workflow must be capable of doing. We regularly judge people on the work that they do, but we don't, and we set goals for people, but rarely do we set goals for process. We should be doing that. We should be thinking about each process in our organization and understanding what it is capable of doing. Now, a capability goal is important. And when we work with clients on their workshop and their workflows, we are very conscious of the fact that it takes a little bit of time to determine this. Many times, an executive will set a goal, and if you've ever seen the "I Love Lucy" video on the chocolate factory line, where she's shoving them in her mouth and in her hair and down her blouse because the line is running too quickly and her job has been threatened, we don't want to do that. We don't want to expect too much from that process. We have to understand what that process is capable of doing. What's the glass ceiling of that process? What can we get it to do in the state that it's in? So that's our capability goal. We want to write down just in the margin there, what does this need to be capable of doing? And you'll see in the printout, it's a little bit more basic, but you just go through the steps that I have in the video of writing out a capability goal. The other thing that we do there is we also look at those bubbles. We put a little star in the right-hand corner of the bubble if the customer touches it there. And that's important because understanding that there are parts of our process that happen in the vacuum behind the scenes. There are parts of our process and systems that touch the customer. And those pieces that touch the customer, it's very important to have an intelligent design and a strategy around those things. You don't want those things evolving and mutating and adapting on their own, because when that occurs, that creates variation. And variation in process is a real problem because it means that it is an asymmetrical process. You've all probably heard a joke about somebody saying they've had a flat tire, but it's only flat on the bottom. Well, that causes just as many issues. So trying to bring symmetry to process is really important. So that's what our capability goal is. The next thing that we want to do is we want to look at those bubbles. We want to draw a little dog leg off of them. Any place where we experience pain. So what is pain? Well, I talked about it earlier. Pain for executives is brand and balance sheet and budget. Pain for middle tier managers and VPs usually is something around resources or a system constraint. But pain at the front line of the organization are simple, many times easy to solve things that are happening that shouldn't be happening. I gave an example at my Vistage talk about a construction trade, an HVAC company that we had their map up on the wall. And on that map, we saw things from technicians in the field saying 25% of the time I get to the job site and the wrong material was loaded on my truck. 40% of the time I get to the job site with the work order and I find out there's been a change order that wasn't communicated to me. Up to 90% of the time, I show up at the job site and a tool is missing from my truck that I need to do that work. That's a wildly profitable HVAC company with hundreds of employees. And yet, a large portion of their time is spent rushing back to the facility to get the correct materials or tools or work orders so that they can then rush back out to the job site for a second time and get to work and then fall behind on the schedule for the rest of the day. That's really frustrating for employees. Employees don't want to be in that situation. It's frustrating for the company, but man, is it frustrating for the customer to know that the guy shows up and doesn't have the tools to do the job. So that's the next step. And you'll go through this in that Quickmap exercise, thinking about 3 to 5 points of pain that are happening in that process that can be quantified with a percentage. 50% of the time this happens, 60% of the time, 30% of the time. And just, it's okay to guess. Your guesses will be quite accurate. You might be surprised at how accurate your guesses are. We have run through 500,000 pain points in the history of this organization. And for the most part, they're pretty good. They're a hand grenade distance away from what they should be. They're a horseshoe, the game of horseshoes. They're close to what's happening. So once you've identified that pain and you've written it on that map and you can see it in the relationship to the process, then the next step is really where the magic happens. And that is going through the process of triage, reading out the pain point. Whatever that 40% of the time, the purchase order or the work order has the wrong information. Well, the first question is, does that inhibit our capability? Does that inhibit the capability of that process? Well, yeah, it does. It makes it really hard to do the work. Do we know the most likely cause? If the answer is no, then we have to do a project. Somebody has to analyze why. They've got to figure out why that thing is happening. They've got to peel the onion and determine what the root cause is. If we do know the root cause, then the next question is, do we have an existing best practice? Yeah, we do. No, we don't. It just depends. Every organization is a little bit different. Best practices are interesting because they're there. Everybody has a best practice. They just maybe not have documented it just yet. Best practices aren't something you create, they're something you find. They're the best way of doing it in the field. And hearing from people and being able to design best practices is really important. So if we don't have a best practice, well, then someone needs to design and implement a best practice. We need to do that, and then we need to train our people on it. If we do have one, then the next question is, does this practice need training or learning? Has everyone in the process been trained on this? Now, when I talk about training, I'm not talking about like potty training a kid, where you hand them a roll of toilet paper and you say, select your gender, and they're going to complete the process on their own. No, training is about teaching people. It's reinforcing that learning. It's making sure they understand what it is. And training is actually quite different than most people anticipate it is. There's actually an old adage that says that when you train something, first you need to do it and explain it. Then uh, you do it and they tell you how to do it. And then finally, they do it and teach how to do it. So most times we don't do that. We sit them in front of a computer with an LMS and we say, good luck. And oh, yeah, you completed the quiz. You're good to go. No, it requires some reinforcement. And if we've trained everybody successfully and everybody feels like they know what they need to do, then it is a matter of enforcement. It's a matter of accountability. But the truth of the matter is, I cannot hold somebody accountable to something that I don't know the root cause of why it's happening. I haven't designed the best practice around it, and I haven't properly trained them. So that's the next piece of the exercise is you going through each pain point. And I like to see you do this as a group, read them out as a group, and then have somebody else triage for you. Does this inhibit our capability? Do we know the most likely cause? Do we have a best practice? Does that require training and learning? And walk through that process with them. At the end of the day, what you can do is write down a list of the answers that you got. And what you will find is there's things like, analyze why this is occurring, design a best practice that will help us create a checklist so these problems don't happen in the future. Train so and so to do this. Enforce that training and learning. And then rank those. Just like we did in ranking which process hurt the most. Ask ourselves and looking at those 3 to 5 proposed solutions, those remedies, and asking yourself, which one of these will make the biggest impact? Now, we've all heard of the Pareto principle. The top 20% produces the top 80%, the 80% of the results. So do that same thing here. Look at that 5 on the list and say, this is the thing. If I do this, it's going to make the biggest impact. And then just work down that list in resolving those issues systematically one by one. So at the end of the day, now you're going to do this in a Quickmap. This is a simple little exercise that you can do in 45 minutes, half an hour to 45 minutes. The way that we do this with teams is we bring a team of 6 to 8 individuals that are part of that process. We put them in a room together. We facilitate with them in building their map and providing that perspective to them. We then ask them to extract from it their pain that they feel in that experience. And then we triage that pain and provide a ranked list back to the executives that says, here's the top 25 things. Here's the 5 you should focus on. Here's what the team believes the proposed solution is. And we go off to the races in doing that. That, in addition to just the ranked list and that new perspective, because we do print these out as maps, as you saw in that one image, we print these out as 20 or 30-foot long maps that you can put up on a wall and you can talk with as a team. So it does provide you that. The other thing it does is it provides you an issue processing methodology, a new way of thinking inside your organization. We worked with a construction supply company back in December, and most of the employees in that room that day had worked there for more than 20 years. They were a bit disgruntled, I have to admit. They were not happy to be there. But after about 2 hours, it really started to click and they were like, our voice is being heard. People can now see what we're going through. People can hear from us and understand. And there were some emotions in the room. There were people that got emotional about that. A few months later, I was on site, and one of the gentlemen that was there was the manager of the forklift drivers. And I was there on site in their warehouse, and I overheard 2 forklift drivers talking. And I tell you this because it shows how this methodology becomes part of the organization. And the one forklift driver said to the other one, that happens all the time. Somebody needs to analyze this and come up with a proposed design solution to solve this problem going forward. And I about had a tear in my eye to hear not a first person that was in one of our workshops and learned the methodology, but other people, forklift drivers in the field, were learning how to analyze and design. Previously, they would have looked at the problem and said, "Yep, happens all the time. That's just the way we do business around here." And they would have moved on. But they stopped. They began to analyze those problems. The other thing that you get from this methodology is Wins 360. The company gets what it wants, a faster process that creates more value and higher quality, and it reduces the stress in the systems. The employees get exactly what they want. They get their voices heard. They get to hear for the first time ever. They've been walking around with shoes full of sharp rocks and glass. And for the first time ever, somebody's taken their shoe off and dumped that stuff out. They have this opportunity to do the work better. The truth of the matter is, many of us at work, we have a lot of busy work. We do a lot of mindless tasks, but there are things that we're passionate about. And having more time to spend on those things that we're passionate about, the things that we love doing about our work, is a win for everybody. And then finally, the customer. The customer has an experience like no other because it's pain-free. It becomes frictionless over time. Friction causes resistance. It causes heat. But when you eliminate that friction and you grease the gears inside the organization, things move more quickly. Now, in the Quickmap exercise, you're responsible to figure out how to go out and do those things, how to plan for them, what the timeline is, and what the milestones. In our methodology, when we work with organizations, we help you do that. A number of the people that are here on our calls are experts in process and change management, project management, and they can help assist companies that work with us in this process. So going back to Deming, the worker's not the problem. The system is the problem. If you want to improve the performance, you must work on the system. Now, E-Myth, the book E-Myth, what we've all probably read, Michael Gerber, we've heard this before, work on it, not in it, on it, not in it. But that's actually not what Michael Gerber said. Michael Gerber said, systematize your business so that you will finally have a chance to work on these things, not just work in on the task level. So time's more valuable than money. This is not a one-time effort of mapping a process. When you map a process and you fix things and you extract pain from it, guess what? The beaver dam upstream breaks and the debris from that washes downstream, and it might cause another bottleneck someplace else. So it's important to be active in this, to not just look at this as mapping one process, but looking at a series of processes in a row, mapping those things out. And then once you get to the end of that cycle, to rinse, lather, and repeat, go back to the beginning and say, let's try this again. What has happened? What has changed? How are things different today than they were before? And how have the improvements that we made changed things? We can then think about, how do we increase the capacity of those systems? We had capacity goals. We can drive larger capacity goals because the systems are capable of doing more things. So set the course for the next 90 days. In one day, you can set the course for the next 90 days in your organization. I'm going to show you what it looks like afterwards, just so that you all can see as I wrap up here. This is what we do. Well, let me make sure it's still sharing. Y'all can see, can y'all see this big, this flow chart here? I'm just going to reshare to make sure, because I realize everybody's on mute. So I have to show it myself. Here we go.
We could see it. It just took a while to load.
Okay. How about there? Is that better? Tracy Ann?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is the process after, because before and after, I should say, this isn't just about doing a map on a wall and hoping for the best, but it's really about understanding that engagement, making sure there's a good executive sponsor for that, an executive who has said, this is something that we want to prioritize and is bringing some light to that. We want to have a host, somebody who can act as a project manager inside that organization to make sure that these things get done, that they're accountable for that. We want to set good goals for that. We want to make sure we have the right people in the room when we do this exercise. You're going to do the quick map by yourself, but share it with somebody else and then compare their results. Ask them, hey, look, let's map out our marketing process. Then look at the two together and go, oh, wait, that's a good idea. I can incorporate that in mine. Oh, you have that pain? Hey, I can resolve that by changing the way the form works. I can do something a little bit differently. And then we do that workshop, and that one-day workshop is intensive. I got to tell you, it's for that 6 or 8 people from the front lines, this is the first time they've used this much of their head in a long time. They've got to really abstract what's happening inside the company and think about what the things that that are occurring. And then after that workshop, we sit down with you and we say, hey, look, let's figure out the quick win. What's the quick win on the list that we can work on right now? And then a couple of weeks after that, we sit down again with the maps. We mail out the maps in a big tube and you roll them out on your wall and you get some feedback from your people. And we talk through those maps and say, what's the course of action here to solve these 7 or 8 things that are on the top of that list? From there, we can help because we've got great project management and change management people on our side that can help provide you the templates to create a project plan and figure out the milestones and determine who the person is going to do that work and what resources they're going to need. And then over the next 90 days, we're that accountable party of calling you up and saying, hey, look, it's been 30 days since you started working on this. How are we doing? Are we accomplishing our goals? Do we need any additional help? And then in addition to that, just because we've got so many experts in our network, maybe you have a problem with something like NetSuite. You're like, we have a really big I know 3 people that are experts in NetSuite implementations. We can connect you with one of those people if you need that help too. But you can see this is a full plan. This is not just the workshop. There's an entire process that goes along with it of surveying and pulsing the results and measuring things and determining the change management structure of those and why they're important and getting caught up through the process. So that is really what we do here at Process Triage. I'm going to switch back over. Tracy Ann, can you let me know? Can you see my final sort of screen here now?
Yep.
All right. So that is really it. And I'm going to open it up for questions. The Quickmap exercise is something that you can obtain from our website. Again, the version that's on there's a little bit more basic because you're printing on 8.5 by 11 sheets. We're printing on big, huge plotters and doing that kind of work. But I would love to open it up for questions now. If anybody has a question about this, I highly encourage you to try the quick mapping exercise. We do have 2 different ways that we work with clients. One of those is we have certified facilitators that can come in and do and work the methodology for you. The other is training up somebody inside your organization as an expert that we work directly with and we provide them assistance and we're on coaching calls with them. And we have a weekly cohort of other corporate facilitators that are getting it together and saying, I'm struggling with this problem. How do I abstract the solution from it? And working with our experts on our side to provide you that assistance at a distance while you're doing the actual physical work on your side inside the organization. So this is a contact for Eric, who you've seen here on the call. If you have any questions, you can reach out to him. And then also we will share here in the chat right now a link to our certifications. We are planning at least 1, possibly 2 training sessions for internal facilitators in North Carolina. One will likely be sometime in the middle of July. And then another one will probably occur this fall. So we're excited to come back out and work with teams in that market. And with that, I am going to open it up for questions.
You all should be able to come off mute on your own if you have a question. If you can't, let me know.
Hi, Derek. It's Annie Keith. How are you?
Hey, hi, Annie. We were just talking about you yesterday.
Hey, be careful. Some of my staff are on this call.
Well, Denise says hello. So
okay. Would you? I think you did a pretty good job describing the best type of person to become a trainer.
Yeah.
Would you mind doing that just so we can have a better idea of who's best fit for this type of?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's wonderful if they have some facilitation experience, because the reality is this: in the room on that day, they are really not the talker. They are the listener, right? They're helping facilitate the methodology that goes through. So that, if it's somebody that's facilitated a method before or somebody that's used to leading, team meetings, those are great. I also think project managers tend to be really good at this. People that have that sort of systems thinking and understand the interconnectedness of events, they tend to be really good too. And we just had a great group that came through yesterday, and they sent, now in this instance, they're manufacturing. So they had a 6 Sigma person. And at first, I think he thought this is too simplistic. And by the end of the day, he was like, oh my God, this is simplistic. He was like, this is exactly what we need because it's simple to practice. So I think you want to find somebody that is willing to get in front of people, that has enough authority to be able to say, okay, you know what, we're going to put that in the parking lot. We're going to move on from that point. And then we are going to teach them the facilitation method. We're going to teach them all of the pieces that go along with that. Tracy Ann, being a project manager, what would you say there?
I agree. I think that you think that way of getting through and the timing that needs to happen during the workshop. But for me, I think the most important thing is being able to control the room, making sure that you can draw people out. They're there for a reason, and you have quiet people, and you have people more like maybe myself and Derek who like to talk a lot. So, I think that's a huge aspect, is being able to control the room and guide the triagers to get to the most important part of the workshop, which is actually the end list that you end up with.
Yeah, I'm going to make a quick point on that, Annie. The map is the most technically complicated part of the work. Rosie, always the founder, always laid aside the fears of new facilitators and said, look, if you mess the map up, it's okay. You're just doing it on the wall. When it gets to our mapping team and they go into Visio and they know all the rules, and they'll fix all those kind of things. But Rosie's point always was the map is secondary to the fact that the map is there to guide people on where to point out their pain, right? To actually say it's happening here. This is where it happens to me. So he would tell you that that map on the wall is really the framework to hang paint on. And being an expert at process isn't as critical. It's more about being able to facilitate that time and making sure that the right people are there and getting things done. Hope that
And
helps.
one other follow-up, thank you for that. I think what might be helpful to us, at least, I don't know about other organizations, is some, and you gave some at our Vistage meeting, but some real world examples of processes that were fixed by this process,
Yeah.
and that we can sell to our teams. So when you bring all these people into the room, they're like, oh, just another meeting that we have to, how do we sell them on the validity of this process? So some of those real world examples would be awesome.
Yeah, and that is something that I do a lot. And when we have more time, right, is really getting into those and understanding. But just to give you really high level, I mean, the great example is the one that I showed from yesterday. We got that up on the wall and realized that there is an entire procedure that is occurring inside that organization around procurement of materials that was created during COVID, that has become a department that has resources and multiple people working in it. And the reason for that department is to make sure that 12 months out, we're planning the materials that we need. And in the workshop, it was asked, how long does it currently take to get materials? And the answer was 7 days. And now the question is, why do we have an entire department that predicts it out 12 months and tries to acquire all these resources when 7 days is the right number? And everybody was like, oh, wow, we built this because of COVID. It's not really necessary anymore. So we can move back into our former roles where there was less stress on us. And then what we're doing is we're taking that, what we call COVID loop, we're memorializing it. We're asking questions. We're learning about the pain and the proposed solutions, and we're keeping a record of that. So the next time there's a big event that occurs that disrupts the supply chain, the future state of the company can pull that out and pull that map out and go, hey, remember back in 2020 when we had to do this? Let's just do that again. That will really help us. So I think that's one of a more extreme example where you find that there's an entire workflow that's no longer necessary. I think more so it comes about to be things where there's a miscommunication. Have a company, a construction company, I think I mentioned it when we were together, that 60% of the pain was around the usage of their ERP system, Procore. And people were saying it doesn't work properly. We don't know how it works, all these things. And we brought that back to the CEO, and he's like, well, that's ridiculous. We trained everybody on this in 2021. And then we asked him the question, how many of the people in that department worked here in 2021? And an hour later, he called me and he said, none, not a single one of this. We did the training, but none of these people worked here. So obviously it's our fault. We need to revolve that and resolve those kind of problems. So I think you find anecdotes like that come out of really every workshop where there's something that's discovered that's so simple to fix and so easy that it gets resolved very, very quickly. I think also the combination of small little things really do add up to a level of satisfaction in the work inside the organization. We have a client that came on board in December. We did their first couple workshops. They've done 3 since that, and they're addicted now. They're like, every time we do these, there's something that comes out of it that really helps us understand how to better run the business and abstract and work around that problem. They're discovering the tigers, and they're deciding which sides are the jaggy sides of the tigers and what are the soft sides of the tigers, and how do we go about addressing that. I hope that helped.
Well, that's very helpful. I just wondered if you had any that we could download off your website.
Oh yeah, I can send you some case studies
Okay.
too.
Okay,
Yeah,
that'd be
absolutely.
awesome.
We've got a lot of
Yeah.
got a lot of case studies that really are the representation of the map and the results. So we'll work on sending some of those out to the list.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
How about other questions?
Hi, Derek.
Hi.
Thank you for the presentation. That was pretty enjoyable. Quick question about logistics. So how do you see this method working out for a company that's only got virtual work arrangements, but no physical office?
Yeah, that becomes a little bit challenging, and I will tell you why. Virtual participants in an in-person workshop are really difficult because there is an aspect of the shoulder-to-shoulder work of being able to stand beside each other and bump into each other and point out each other's challenges and problems. So we suggest, and we're looking at some online methods, but we haven't found any just yet that solves that problem of having to be shoulder to shoulder to build the work. So we suggest trying to find a time when you are going to bring those people together. Maybe that's for planning or for training or for some other purpose. And then working that schedule to include that. Actually, there's a company that I met last week in North Carolina that just asked me and said, "Hey, we've got a retreat that we're doing with all employees this fall. Is that that might be a place where we do this, where we have a couple of breakouts, where we have a day where we're bringing some teams through and doing some of these things." But I wish I had a better answer on that, but it is really difficult to do certain types of work virtually. And this is one of those pieces of work that's hard to do virtually. Is there
Okay.
any time where you all do get together?
So yes and no. So there's times that we get together across the organization by certain title, so certain level.
Sure.
So C-suites get together on a physically get together at a certain time of the year, but that's only C-suite. This type of exercise will be more beneficial for all the vertically integrated people across all levels. So I kind of see that as a little bit of a challenge myself, and hence my question is that we don't really have a current recurring forum that everybody gets together physically.
Definitely. And there is one methodology that we do use when we've done a workshop with a team in person, and then we do subcategories of that process virtually with the same team, because they've had that experience together, right? So it's a little easier to do that, but it does make it a little bit more tricky. We'd have to definitely think about the logistics on that.
Okay, well, thank you. At least that was a very transparent answer.
No, I mean, I wish I had a great solution for that problem, because it is it's commonplace today. How about other questions? I think we've got a hand raised here.
Yes. What is the difference between the process triage and the Six Sigma methodology and tools that Six Sigma uses?
Great question. Six Sigma really is very much around perfection. The Six Sigma methodology allows you to make 1 error per million opportunities to make errors. That is a wonderful goal to try to attain. I don't think, and listen, if you're in precision manufacturing and you're Boeing, I really want you to do that. I don't want planes to fall out of the sky. Most business process is, not even close to that level of efficiency. It's in the 40s or 50% efficiency. And what this really does is help be that first sort of push, hearing from the employees about what's happening, triaging those results and making those improvements. Now, I mentioned that Rosie, when he started this inside the telecom company, he actually had 17 employees that this is what they did. They did process triage full time. And they worked hand in hand with a Six Sigma team to hand off the proposals for at the end and said, here's the challenges we're hearing from employees. How can we improve these things? So I would say, really, if you're in manufacturing, and actually we work with a trigger company we're starting to do some work with. On the floor, they are Six Sigma. When you're doing precision sniper triggers, you're Six Sigma. All of their other processes of accounting and finance and HR aren't doing anything like this. So we're focusing our attention on those departments, and then because they really don't need it on the floor. But this can really be used hand in hand. It also can be used as sort of a high level replacement. And it really does work well together, because this is an entry point into quality and process efficiency, where I would say Six Sigma is the PhD and master's degree of it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. How about other questions? Anybody? I can't see the chat, so I'm just looking to see if there's any other ones that I missed. Great. So our plan is that we are working right now, because we've had so much interest in North Carolina, and I think 40 people on this call has proven that. We are looking at dates to come out there. So if it is something that you are interested in doing, either on a workshop perspective or having a facilitator certified inside your organization, just reach out to us through the website. I think we can add that up here. Is that the the process fixer.com/certification, or reach out to Eric directly. And we are working to collaborate. We have a number of you have been very grateful in offering facilities as well for us to do training. So we're excited about that. And I think we'll probably end up picking a couple dates where we come out, maybe one in July and then one like in September, where we'll be in the market and can be doing some training. Matthew, you had a question. Oh, we've got to unmute you somehow. Let me see.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, great to see you again. That was a wonderful session at Vistage last week.
Thank you.
I have my process map in front of me. Can you go back to the process triage protocol, the right side there with the the vertical workflow? There we go.
Yeah.
So I just have a question, and I think my internal logic is conflicting, and I want to understand the process and not have the internal angel and the devil fighting inside. So, if we go down, does it inhibit the capability goal? We'll say yes. We go down, do we know the most likely cause? If we say no there, we go over to analyze, right?
Yeah.
Now from analyze, once you analyze the pain point for most likely causes, then you re-triage. Down below in that center section there, it doesn't say to re-triage anything else. Does that just mean jump to the path on the right, go down to estimate the solutions level?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So
because my logic says to go down to say yes to everything on the very far left eventually.
You got it right. So this is really in the workshop of, once we analyze something, then the next question that I have at the end of the day is, how big is that? If I'm sitting with somebody and I say that estimate the solutions level of effort is really to determine, is this a big thing that needs to be done, or is it a small thing that needs to be done? And that is really in our in-person workshops, something that we go through. It's really an extra step. But you are 100% correct, Matthew. Once you analyze something, then and you find out what it is, well, now you know the answer. So what's the next question? Do we have an existing best practice, method, or tool? Like, oh no, we're gonna have to design and implement. So you're right that no matter where you are, if it's a design and implement, once you design and implement, you got to train it and enforce it now, right? Once you train on it, you have to enforce it. So each one of those are truly nested into each other. And that line over on the side there, I probably should take it off there when we do the Vistage one, because it's really saying, hey, is this a big deal or a small deal? And we didn't really get into that in that workshop that day.
That's great. That explained exactly what I was asking. So it could almost be analyze, complete, and then a little U-turn back over to the line of questions on the left. So, okay, but that's if it's a big problem, that's what that would be. If it's a small problem, you go down to the bottom and resolve.
Yeah, you could just go down to the bottom and resolve. And you still might need a design piece in there. I always say, and I think this is an interesting philosophy to think about, right? The capability goal of a process is there to break. I want to break it. I want to break this process so that I can increase the capability goal and then improve the process again. So if I have a lot of things on my list that are train and enforce, that means I need to start breaking stuff. I got to start breaking stuff in my company so that I can build it better and bigger. So I don't want to just get into a loop where I'm always just train and enforce, right? That's just sustaining. When I get up to analyze and design, I'm tearing the cover off something and figuring out how to make it work better. And then I've got to train and enforce on that again, over and over and over in this repeated cycle. Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else have a question before we wrap up? Man, I can't believe I made it within 1 minute of the time too. That's pretty darn good. We will do some follow-up. If you have specific cases that you would like to see if we have a case study on, we can send you these big maps that sort of show you how all this works. We have hundreds of case studies in our database. If you're in a one of you that were, I think maybe he's even on the call, asked me about staffing one. And I was like, let me see. Yep, boom, got it. And he called me yesterday and was like, I've been showing it to all my staffing friends. And they're like, this is great, you know, because it really reflects what you have going on in your process. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Connect with us on LinkedIn. I'm Derek Maines on LinkedIn. I also have a great podcast called The Process Fixer that is all about operations. We talk about this methodology all the time. Matthew, your hand shows you raised again, but I'm not sure that's the case. If it is, let us know.
No, that is not the case.
Okay, great. You're just waving at us. That's great.
There we go. Thanks. Appreciate
Well, thank
you.
everybody. Thank you all for being on the call. Please reach out to follow up. If you need questions or if you have questions about the quick maps and how to do that exercise, we've got a video on the site, but we are here to help you. And I hope to see you all here in North Carolina in the coming months.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank
Thank
you all.
you.
Bye-bye.